Hey everyone, and welcome to Promote Hope Podcast, episode 15, The Beauty of Therapy. So, I wanted to do a podcast talking about therapy, talking about the good things about therapy and the positives about it, and just uplifting, people and making people aware of what therapy really is. For me, I grew up in a household that I didn't really know what therapy was. I didn't see anyone going to therapy, and now I'm older and I need it. I need it in my life, and I have people in my life that's telling me that it's a great thing, but for me, it's just not something that I was taught to do. So I have a special guest with me, Kimberly Riley. I'm going to be interviewing her about therapy. She is a therapist, and I'll let her tell you guys a little bit about herself. So, welcome, Kimberly, to the podcast. Thank you for joining me. Thank you for taking the time to share about therapy. But before we get into the questions, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well, hi, everybody. I'm Kimberly Riley. I am a licensed marriage and family therapist in the state of Washington. And I work with children, I work with adults, I work with couples, families, pretty much everybody. A little bit more about me that's personal is I'm from Bremerton. I grew up here. I'm married. We have 3 girls. Um, on this Thursday, I will have finished my doctor in social work degree. So
Yay!
that will be happening on this Thursday. I'm really thankful to the Lord that I've been able to get this far and almost complete that. Um, I really am passionate about kids. So although I see everybody, I see adults and children together, I am really mostly passionate about children. So I have a project out right now that's geared toward children living in poverty and preventative behavioral health therapy for them. And so that's the most recent thing that I've been working on.
That is amazing. Congratulations. You
Thank you.
doing the work. You are doing the work. Well, tell us what therapy is. Like, what is therapy? Can you
So
break it
therapy, yeah. So therapy is well, psychotherapy is really what I do. It's narrative therapy based, but psychotherapy in and of itself is something that is geared towards a setting that people enter into. So that's usually hear people say, "I'm going to therapy," going into do a psychotherapy where they're touching on their stories from their past, ways to be well, healing, finding and understanding their emotions, coping skills. I mean, there's so many things that come with psychotherapy,
down?
from getting a diagnosis to not having a diagnosis to couples therapy, premarital therapy, anger management, all of those things kind of fall within what psychotherapy is. But in general, it really is just something that's created to help people understand themselves better and work through different feelings, thoughts, emotions.
And when you say understand themselves better, like for me, do you see people like for me, if I'm stuck in a place, is it then that I need to say, okay, I need to understand why I'm stuck? Or is it more so I'm stuck because I'm this way? You know what I mean?
So both that's kind of almost the same thing, right? So if you're stuck because of the way that you are or something that you're doing is the reason. That's not always why people come in though. Some people like to begin, like, so when you think about premarital therapy, right, or premarital counseling, those words are kind of interchangeable. They're 2 separate things, but if you're coming in and for before you get married, you're trying to get some skills that you think you might need in your marriage, as opposed to maybe a couple who comes in to see me after something happens in their marriage, maybe communication isn't working well, so then they come at a different stage. So understanding yourself looks a little bit like, maybe you've been feeling sad for a really long time and you want to know how to manage the sadness.
Okay.
It depends. So there's all these different ways of doing therapy with people. It depends on the therapeutic technique that somebody's using. So for me, if you were seeing me, I come from like a narrative therapy approach. So I would help a person see whatever they're identifying as a problem outside of themselves.
Okay.
So, and we would be working towards overcoming whatever that problem is from a distance. And so, but then there's other ways, like I said, of working with people, and that's not always the practice that people use. So it really kind of depends on the therapist and then the reasons that you're in therapy and
Okay.
what you're hoping to get from it.
So, okay, so quick question. So, if me and my husband wanted to go to therapy because we're dealing with something, do we talk about the problem or do we talk about each other as individuals?
It would depend on what you feel like the problem is. So
Okay.
if communication is the problem, you may be looking at each other as individuals. You may be saying individually,
Okay.
I like to get really mad and walk away. So that's
Yeah.
kind of an individual thing, right? That's like a me thing. When somebody gets loud, maybe I'm gonna walk away, but that becomes a problem in marriage and communication. So as a marriage and family therapist, I'm kind of looking at the couple as the system, the couple's the client,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm always looking at the individual people in the marriage. So if you were seeing me by yourself, but you're talking about marriage things, I would probably be talking to you individually about the
Right.
ways that, yeah, that you could be different, or that, you could hope to see something different in your relationship.
Right. Well, why do you think that people are afraid to go to therapy?
I think it's unfamiliar to people. Like you said, you didn't really grow up with the idea of therapy or seeing a therapist. So a lot of people are afraid of what doesn't make sense to them, right? If we don't really know, then we feel afraid. So when you mention fear, that's the first thing that comes to my mind is people just don't really know. They don't have enough knowledge about what it is. They've heard it's something. They've maybe have heard stories from people that it didn't go well. Maybe they themselves have tried something that's been therapeutic and it didn't feel like it fit. You have a whole community mental health system that children are sometimes a part of. And so they may grow up and maybe they had a broken experience there. And so they don't want to try therapy. So there's lots of reasons why people are afraid, but
Okay.
it usually stems from them not understanding. They're not really sure of something that may happen in the room with the therapist.
So if I am suggesting therapy to someone, should I say just try or just say, okay, if they say I don't want to go, just let it be
Yeah.
that.
Well, we have lots of different systems we're part of. So if you were talking to somebody maybe who had a large family, you could point them to somebody in their family system. If they're not really, the key is getting people to talk. So if you have somebody that you really feel is in need and they're like, no, I'm not going to go to therapy, the key then is to point them to somebody within their system somewhere to get them talking. But also you can walk through the therapeutic search with them. So looking at people's profiles online, reading a little bit about who they are, calling them, talking to them on the phone. You can do that with a friend. I have people sometimes who will call for somebody else. They'll say, hey, my daughter, it could be a grown-up daughter, but my daughter's looking for somebody, and we ran across your profile. Could you tell me a little bit more about you so I can tell them? So I have that happen sometimes.
Right. That's probably what I would suggest next time. I would suggest myself as being there, being a person in their corner to say, I can call and make the call, for you if that's what you need. Can you tell us how therapy is a blessing? Like, how does therapy connect spiritually with people? Because if I can just be transparent, growing up, therapy wasn't looked at as amazing because God will handle it, God will take care of it, God got you, pray your way through, praise your way through. So a lot of times people that are going to therapy has some type of problem that they're trying to get through or struggle. So,
Hmm.
how can we look at therapy as something that is a blessing, to
Hmm.
the community?
Hmm. I think so. Yeah, from a spiritual perspective, a lot of times people do begin with their faith system first. So if somebody's praying for an answer or a solution or a breakthrough or peace, and then they get into therapy, they have a great connection with their therapist and they start working on some things together. That could be a clear answer to prayer for somebody. I mean, it's coming through another person, which we're in community with people all the time. So if you are asking God to do something in your life, and there's been a person put into your life in the form of your therapist, then that's the answer to prayer. That's a blessing. And if we start there, we kind of end there, right? Like if you say, hey, you know what, God, I need something different. I need something now. And then you get that in that space. It is an answer to your prayer. And some people quantify that as being a blessing, right? So, yeah.
Really good about that. So my next question is, do you feel like people don't get into therapy because of financial reasons?
Most definitely. Yes.
Are they
That's
aware? Is it something that that maybe you could share with us that we can know that maybe it's not as expensive as we think? Is there anything like that you could share?
yeah. So finances, I think is probably second to the fear. I mean, maybe even is together. Maybe people are fearful about the finances, but I think they kind of go together. The financial piece there's lots of work that's been done in the insurance level. So with insurances, they are now covering behavioral health care. That's usually how it will fall in your plan. So people who have insurance, if you're looking for coverage and you want to know what you have, it's going to probably be under behavioral health care benefits. A lot of people have to meet a deductible. So then even though you have coverage, you're still paying out of pocket. And then children and adults, of course. So anybody who's living in poverty or in the state of Washington at some point was able to be to receive Medicaid or CHIP.
Mhm.
CHIP is specifically for kids, Medicaid for everybody. There's behavioral health care benefits for them, and there is no cost. So anybody that takes your coverage, you can see them at no cost to you. If you're paying out of pocket, it can get expensive. It can. People, they charge different amounts, and sometimes they charge quite a bit. But some therapists will have something called pro bono sessions that they offer, which is free, or reduced fee sessions for people. They're oftentimes limited, but they do exist. Like on my webpage, I have language around pro bono sessions for kids. I'm probably not going to turn any kids away. That's something from a spiritual perspective that I think God has asked me to do, is to see children. So it's likely that I'm sorry, say it again.
What's the ages of the
5 to 18.
okay.
So I have worked with children under 5, and I can. Their sessions need to be real short because they like to hang out for a short while. But 5 to 18, and so that age group is really special to me. But older people, also adults, there's pro bono sessions for them. So there's that. You asked about other resources. Gosh, for people, I mean, there's all different types of ways of getting therapy. So the first thing that just came to my mind, like Coffee Oasis, that's in Kitsap County. So for homeless teens, they have lots of places have different things. Like they have things there for crisis. So you start breaking down the care and the needs.
To like research and find what works for you.
Yeah. You have to read. So when it comes to that financial piece, you do have to do some research because, we talked about looking for a provider and you're going to look on their webpage. You may want to search a little bit farther into their webpage to see if, like I said, there's language around, pro bono sessions or reduced fee sessions. Because if you ask, a lot of times if they have some spaces available, they'll say yes. And then, of course, researching your insurance. So if you want to know what behavioral health plan coverage that you have, you sometimes have to actually look through your plan or call your insurance. So research, that's the best way to put it. You do have to do a little bit of research.
Yeah, and just thinking about the child part sends me into my next question because transparent moment. My brother passed away when I was 14 years old, and the way that he passed away was very intense. And I was at an after school function when I found out. Like it was like a very traumatic experience for me. But I did not get counseling and therapy. I did not go to a counselor. I did not go to a therapist. I did not get any help or was able to talk to someone about what happened to me. It was like what you see a lot of in the Black community, what you see a lot of, period, not really going to therapy, not really offering that to children.
Mhm.
And, it was a hard place. I didn't know to even request it. I've never seen it. I've never seen, like, my mom was not, never like, okay, me and your dad are going to therapy, or, I've never seen that before. So I didn't even know to say, I need a therapist. But I know that I needed someone to talk to.
Mhm.
I had my siblings, and I had my mom to talk to, and I had my family members to talk to. But we were all grieving. You know what I mean? So can for me as a child, would that have helped me to have get received counseling? I know children that lost a family member. Should they be recommended for counseling, or should we just as parents try to counsel them through it?
Yeah, yes, therapy, counseling, whatever you want to name it, talking to anybody, somebody is helpful. When you just said it, when you have a whole family of people grieving, everybody's going to grieve differently. It's so hard sometimes to come outside of yourself to support the other people in your family in a way that makes sense to them. Right. So, yes, as families, we all work together. We get through the grief together, and the loss together. But there are times where what we need to say, we hold back because we don't want to make somebody else sad. So, say, I don't want to say this to my other sibling because they're closest to the sibling that just passed, and so I'm going to hold it inside. That's where counseling and therapy really is helpful, because you're able to just get it out there. You're able to say that you have something going on inside of you without the fear of hurting anybody's feelings, right? And then the person who is in your family that maybe is grieving completely opposite than you are doesn't feel like they can't connect with you either, right? Like they can't say to themselves, well, I'm so different than them, I can't help them, because everybody's different, right? And so there's none of that. That conflict doesn't show up in that way because people are getting what they need. So yes, a child who is grieving most definitely can benefit from that. But again, we have to go with what we have. So, I always think about basic needs. If in fact you have a family that is really, really against, therapy in the way that we think of it as therapy, still push them to talk to somebody, so whoever it is, a family friend, or, if we're talking about church, maybe a pastor, somebody, because we have to get those thoughts and feelings and emotions out.
I agree. I totally agree with that. And I just, when I was grieving my friend, now that I'm older, last year, I was able to talk to someone, and that was so great for me. That was so great for me. I could say whatever I want,
Mhm.
however I felt. It was so freeing, and they didn't know the person, so they weren't like, yes, let's cry together. They weren't like that, but they very had much empathy for me.
Yeah.
Um, I could say whatever and not feel judged, not feel like, well, you shouldn't have talked like that about your, so and so. You know what I mean? Like, you shouldn't feel that way. It just felt so good to be able to share with someone that, didn't judge or didn't have anything to say about how I felt.
Yeah, right. That is a freeing thing. And
Going into my next topic, I want to ask about marriage therapy.
yeah,
How is therapy great for marriages?
it is great for marriage because a lot of people have other things existing in their life outside of just being married, right? So you may be a parent, you may be in the stage in life where you're taking care of your parents, you know, um, you may have a job that feels a little tough sometimes, depending on your own job that could be in the helping field. So there's lots of reasons why marriage and family therapy or couples therapy is helpful to a marriage. So one key thing to going in as a couple is to understand what it is that you want to get out of the therapy itself. So sometimes I'll have couples and they'll come in and they don't know, they're not real sure. So we have to talk through that and say, what is it that you'd like to get out of this? And that's really the first step. I feel like that's the first real win in couples therapy, is deciding what we like from this. And that helps couples because it gets them into decision making. It gets them into being on the same team. Sometimes, depending on how long you've been married for, marriage therapy is helpful in getting you back to whatever it is that's missing now. So if you've been married for like, 25 years and things feel like they're a little stressed in your marriage, coming in and talking about what marriage looked like before is great for reconciliation in your marriage. So it's helpful in all those ways, helpful in any area that you can think of.
Well, a lot of what I've seen is women suggesting the therapy and men not so much wanting to go. It could be vice versa. I usually see it that way, but it could be where a male's like, let's go to therapy, and the woman's like, I don't think we need it. But how, like, what are some ways that we can get like unwilling spouses to come to therapy? Is there a creative way to get them to say, like, okay, I'll go? Because if they just get there, like for
Yeah.
me, in my situation, when my husband, when we just got there, when we left, we were like, that wasn't so bad. That was kind of cool. You know what I mean? But it's the
Right.
getting there.
Right. So, well, the key is you want people to be willing. So you want them to be willing participants. You don't ever want to start to bargain with your spouse. So you don't want to, you don't want to say things like, you know, if you just come with me to this, then, fill in the blank. Because some folks may say, okay, we're going to bargain. I'll go, one time, but I'm not going to enjoy it. They start saying strange things like that.
Yeah.
So one way to get people there is to get them thinking about what they would like to see different, and then helping them understand that change can come through going to therapy. So if you have a spouse who's unwilling to go, talking to them about what they would like to see different, and then getting them to see that can happen there is powerful. Also, yes, I think you're right. On the back end, a lot of ladies probably are maybe suggesting to their spouses, but on my end, I have quite a few men reaching out to me, and they'll say, I don't know how they arrive, but they're like, my wife and I, we need to come in. I think often that's maybe it can either be a final or a first step in some type of reconciliation within the marriage.
Okay.
And so I do think that there is that voice you're saying. I think that voice exists. And then maybe that the other spouse is saying, I would like to reconcile with my wife, or I'd like to reconcile with my husband. And this was the first step, So that happens quite a bit. But I also tell people this too. So when I mentioned looking at people's profiles, say you have a spouse who's stuck. They're like, I don't really want to go. I don't really want to do this. Another great tool is to say, hey, why don't you go online and you find a marriage and family therapist that you feel comfortable with, and then I'll go. So you pick the therapist. Will that be helpful then if you can pick, if you can call them? So that's just, again, that's another way to get people to buy into the whole process.
And I didn't mean any harm, but that's what I told Hab. I was like, look, I didn't even ask. I was like, look, we have a meeting and you are free to say or not say anything. Just your presence. And then if you're feeling it, great. If you're not, okay, I'm not gonna force you to say anything, but can I just have your presence?
Mm-hmm.
And he ended up really being able to share. I was surprised. It wasn't easy for us, but I was surprised at his sharing because I was expecting him to just be like mute. But he actually shared. And then when we were done with the therapy, we talked together about it, and it it allowed us some room to be open, a little bit more transparent with each other. We weren't as afraid to be transparent about the topic, or whatever we were dealing with at the moment. So I was grateful, and he ended up being grateful. You know what I mean? Like, it was a tug. It was like, just come on, just you'll be all right. I know
Yeah.
you said that's not a good way to do it.
Sometimes, again, I think in love, right? I think that works too. I mean, there are times where you're like, look, you really, you can really benefit from this.
Yeah.
Are you willing to just go in and try, and I think that you're right. Something great can happen for sure. The person has to be open to it though. They've got to get there and be open to something changing. But if it takes you, kind of picking them up and taking them in there, sometimes, hey, sometimes that works. I would encourage people to get buy-in and have motivation for themselves. But, in a crisis situation, sometimes that's how it looks in a
And
crisis situation.
yeah, and that's what I was telling Hap. Like, do you want our marriage to work too? This could be the helping factor. This could be an option. Like, let's weigh out our options to see if this is something that could be helpful to our marriage. Let's just see. Do you? So the willingness wasn't necessarily to be in therapy, but for the marriage to keep working.
Yeah, right.
You know what I mean? He had a desire for the marriage to keep working as well, so I could get him.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
He was willing in some kind of way, right?
Yeah, for sure. Yep.
Well, let me ask you, do you go to therapy?
I do. I do. I do go to therapy. So, my husband and I, we've been married for 21 and a half years. And we do couples therapy once a month. We've been doing that for the last 6 years, actually. It kind of started with us going in to just learn how to communicate effectively as two grown adults, because I was a teenager when I got married. And so we just, as adults, I'm like, we really need to know how to communicate effectively. So that's how it started. Then also for myself as a marriage and family therapist in school. So I was in school at that time, getting ready to enter into my internship. And so one of the requirements of my school was to have therapy. So that's a requirement. So these are like the background things. So most therapists should have had at some point a requirement to go to therapy themselves while they were in school. So because it's a marriage and family therapy program, they were like, you can go to marriage and family therapy to see a marriage and family therapist if you want, because how else will you know what it feels like if you don't try it?
Right.
So I did some individual therapy on my own, and then I coupled that with some marriage and family therapy stuff with my husband, and we just continue to go once a month. That's just what we do now. We go once a month.
So even if there's no issue, even if you guys just do that a part of your marriage.
Yeah. I mean, he's in the helping field, he's in the helping field himself as a pastor. And so I think it's important that we both take really good care of ourselves. And then, we're parents to 3 teenage girls, and he and I are both only children. I mean, it's a mess. So we have to talk to somebody about how to really fully function in all of what we have, and so that's what we do. Every month there's something always comes up. There's always something to talk about every single month, whether it's parenting, whether it's talking about how to manage the things that we've heard in our occupation. The cool thing is because we're both in helping fields that are confidential. So the thing is, in sessions, we're never talking about the things we heard. We're talking about how we're trying to process the things that we've heard, if that makes sense, right? So he gets the fact that I'm in a field where I can't share the details, and I get that he's in a field where he can't share the details. So we really respect that about each other. But in therapy, we're able to talk about how those details that we can't share are affecting our own mental health. Right. So it's important that he and I do that once a month.
Yes. And you're speaking about the helping field. I know a lot of people in the helping field. I know a lot of people who God is calling them to serve, mainly myself. Now, that is such a great idea, thinking about you're serving and helping so many others. I love talking about self-care. I love, doing my little self-care, doing a little something for myself here and there when I can get a, moment to breathe. Like you were encouraging me, just take some time for yourself. But wow, never did I think like, you may need therapy, girl.
Mm-hmm.
Consistently.
Yeah. At least once a month, or as a check-in. That's the thing. I hope that, after people listen to this podcast, that they understand therapy is not like the worst thing on earth, right? Going to therapy is not the worst thing on earth. It's a space where you can go to be well, right? You can be really well, but why not be more well, right? You can increase your wellness by taking intentional time.
That is amazing. And I love to serve. I love to help. And what I don't want to see for myself is I don't want to see burnout. I want to keep enjoying what I'm doing. And I feel like having that place, once a month to put that information would be amazing for me. I think I'm having a breakthrough right now.
Good. All right.
For sure. Because again, like you said, The helping field, you're getting everybody's emotions. Everybody's coming to you. You know, you're pouring out. You're pouring out. And wouldn't it be nice if once a month I just said, "This is my time."
Yeah.
To get filled back.
Mm-hmm.
And are you a Christian therapist? Like, can I talk about my faith? And are there therapists that don't really, let you talk about your faith, or how does that work?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. So in the state of Washington, we don't actually have like certified or licensed Christian counselors. Other states do. So I contract with a place where it identifies in the name that we are Christian therapists, we're Christian counselors. So people kind of come in with that idea, but I also have people who will see me there and they're not identified Christians, which is really kind of cool and interesting to me that they still choose that space to see me in, considering that they could see me in another space, but that's not in the title, right? But as a Christian, I'm always a Christian, right? So like I identify as a Christian myself, no matter how I'm practicing. I believe that God is always giving me what I need to be able to think clearly, effectively, have the knowledge that I need, the compassion, the wisdom, all these things come from God. As far as the faith piece, so faith, right? So there's other faiths that exist besides Christianity. When you're sitting with a client, when I'm sitting with you the very first time, and you come in, usually there's an intake form that people fill out, and they may talk about their faith. They may, because there's different ways for us to find that out without actually asking them. And then you can just ask them, but there are ways to find out what their faith system is because it's part of their support system. So that's kind of how that works. There's a lot of people who are not comfortable talking about faith in the ways that maybe a client may need them to, if that makes sense. But the program that I was a part of at Seattle University it integrated spirituality into it. So we were all trained in that program to be able to integrate that into our care. So that's another one of those things where you really have to look at a person's profile and
Right.
see if they identify if they have a faith system. But if it doesn't say it, it definitely doesn't mean that you don't talk about it, because that's who you are. So
Right.
you have to bring you to the room. You don't hide any part of you that you think is important. So your therapist should be able to meet you there. And if not, then that's probably a good indication that you should maybe check for somebody else.
Okay. And then will it say like Christian? Will it say like Christian therapist, or will it just not say anything?
It may not, so that since that's not like one of those designated, we're not licensed that way in the state of Washington, you may not see that. You may not see that, but like I said, who I contract with, it does say Christian counselors. And so everybody is still licensed through the state of Washington, either as a social worker, a mental health counselor, or a marriage and family therapist like myself, or a psychologist or psychiatrist. But reading a person's profile is the best way to get a sense of who they are and what their belief system is, because usually they will say there that they are a Christian or have some type of knowledge around some faith based system.
Right. Well, I want you to share with us, with the audience, with everyone, what would you say to someone who may want to go to therapy but afraid, someone who if therapy is not their norm, someone who has tried therapy and it hasn't worked. So all different audience, if this was your platform, if this was your stance, what would you say to just people about therapy?
Yeah. This is my chance, right, to say something to people.
This
I
is
would say
it.
that this is it. Especially people of color, right? I don't know who all will listen to this podcast, but anybody or different generations, so generational gaps. But people who wouldn't generally go to therapy, I want you to know that therapy is for you. It's what you make it, and you can search for something that fits specifically to you. So if you are looking for a therapist who is in your same generation, right? They exist, they're out there, they're for you. Search until you find the right person. If you happen to get into the room and the person you thought was the right person isn't the right person, don't give up. The need still exists. You still had that same need to talk to somebody, to work through something. So don't give up on that need. Find the person that's specifically for you, because they're out there. Finances. Don't let finances get in the way. We talked about the fear earlier. I think the two things people are afraid of is being judged and not being able to financially maintain therapy. There are programs for you that exist if you don't have the funds. And if you do have the funds, maybe this is an investment for you. So maybe it's worth spending the money to see somebody. And if you're afraid of being judged, again, find somebody that you can work with, that you don't feel that judgmental that judgmental spirit, if that's the best way to put it. You don't feel judged, because then you won't open up and you won't share. You probably won't get all of what you came to therapy for. If you're a child, right, keep asking yourself. If you have little kids watching right now this podcast, ask your parents. Tell your parents you need somebody to talk to. You want to talk to somebody. And even if you're at home and you have nobody to talk to, draw it out. Draw your feelings out. Write your feelings out. That's helpful. So that's the next thing. I think if you can't get into the therapy room, do therapeutic things. So find a way to heal on your own. If we're talking spiritual, find a spiritual practice that works. If we're talking emotional, find something, journaling or listening to music or being creative. But don't give up on yourself, right? Hang in there and find something that works.
Amen. Thanks for sharing. Now, you are, again, a therapist. How can we find you?
You guys want to find? Okay, y'all want to find me. So you can go to my website. It's www.youarebeautifulpllc.com. So you can find me there. You can message me there. You can call me. So you can call me at 360-440-4021, or you can text me at that number also. I'm from the community. This is where I live, so where I'm from. You probably could ask somebody, they could probably find me. So right. Don't come to my house knocking on the door, but I bet you somebody knows where I live and they can get a hold of me if you really need help. And I really mean that. Like, I don't want anybody to go without what they need. I probably, so this is another thing too, since you asked me this. So if I know you personally, I know you, I'm probably not going to be your therapist. I will be your friend and I will help you through it. Yeah. So I won't leave you out there, but I will not be your therapist, but I can get you to a therapist that maybe will be fitting for you. So I get that question a lot, especially when people ask me that question, because they'll reach out and that's something that they want to do, but you don't have to, I don't have to be a therapist for me to help you. But I do encourage you to have a special place, a confidential place, and so I can get you connected with somebody.
Now, say if somebody wants to connect with you, and it's, okay, two things. Do they have to live in Washington? Because right now it's COVID. Are you doing therapy remotely, or are you seeing people, or can I get a Zoom call with you to do therapy? That's one. And two, are you doing things remotely so that they can be in Washington?
Right. That was a great question. I didn't even think about people, watching a podcast not in the state of Washington. So no. So I can't see anybody. I cannot do therapy with anybody outside of the state of Washington. Yes, I can do teletherapy. That's all I'm doing right now in COVID season. We all, from me and my perspective, we all need to remain safe as we can. And so in the therapy room, it's small and it's just, I can't get it clean enough, the air, for people to come in and out. So I really want to protect people. So everything I'm doing right now is through a HIPAA compliant format. HIPAA, that's the confidentiality piece. Everybody signs that when they go to doctors and when you see somebody. And so that's what I'm doing with everybody. So all over Washington State, wherever you are in Washington, I can see you. This is a here you go, something that is not in the public, but it will be in the public. My next space of trying to get licensed will be in the state of Georgia. I feel like I receive a lot of people looking for marriage and family therapy from Atlanta. And so my grandparents are from Atlanta, Georgia, and this is just one thing that I can give back to them. I get a little emotional even saying that.
Because you can give it back?
Yeah, I can give back to my grandparents. So, yeah. So that's my next. So if you live in Georgia, hopefully sometime soon I'll be licensed there, and then I can see you via teletherapy in the state of Georgia. But so yeah, and then from there the state of California, which is a little bit harder to get licensed in, but that's coming up next.
But if they are watching this podcast and they can reach out to you, you can help them find someone, or you can help them in some type of way.
Yes, yes, most definitely. I have some resources. I have people that I know probably if I don't know somebody in a state, I know somebody that they can see you. COVID season, the rules were changed a little bit. So I read that question that you asked is pretty relevant, although we're coming out of COVID season from the perspective of open borders for seeing people. There are some states right now that would allow me to practice telehealth, but practice in their state for like 6 weeks because there's so many people that are suffering right now with their mental health. So if somebody lives in a state right now where, I think about New York, where they had a large pandemic there with people who had COVID, and so they were looking for providers. So there are states where they did open their borders for us to be able to see clients within that state, but generally the general rule is I can only see people here in the state of Washington.
Understood. But I think that, I open this up to everybody. I don't
Yes.
even know who listen. I don't know who gets to view. I don't even know. So I didn't want, I wanted to be clear on that. And I wanted people to be able to seek you out and have a clear understanding when they're seeking you out of how much you'll be able to help them if they weren't in Washington. You know what I mean?
Right. Well, this is the thing. So you know what we're doing right now, this podcast.
Yeah.
So one thing we can do anywhere, all over the place, is webinars and workshops
Yeah.
and podcasts. I mean, my voice can go anywhere. So if people are watching today and they're like, hey, you know what, I really would like for her to talk to our church, about whatever, being well right now. The biggest thing is parenting during COVID-19 season, or taking care of yourself during COVID-19. I can do that, right? And that's what I'm saying. I think that there's ways for people to have therapeutic tools without being in the room, because we do have so many people that are not, for whatever reason, are not able to get into a room with a therapist.
Okay.
I can bring things to people. So that is an option. If they get to my website and they're interested in that, they can always send me a message that way. And so I can provide my services that way to them.
Well, thank you so much for being willing to come on the podcast and share about therapy. People talk to me all the time, and I don't know sometimes if they want me to fix it, just listen, just not. But I know that therapy would be great. Therapy pops into my head to tell them, "Oh, try this," but it's so not the norm. I think it's starting to become the norm. I do. I think it's starting to become more, you know, receptive. People are starting to receive it more, but it's still a little,
Yeah.
finicky.
I
You know,
yes, I know.
I just wanted to bring you here to share about the power of, therapy and how beautiful it is and how if we intake in it, like I'm going to start therapy for myself as a servant.
Okay.
I do a lot.
Yeah.
I need some therapy.
Yes. Yes.
I
Hmm.
have a best friend. I have these tools, but I think it will be a great thing for me to do for myself by myself
Yeah, for sure.
and build a connection with someone who's willing to sit with me and support me, in
Yeah.
another way. In another way. Not saying that my family can't do that, but you know what I mean?
Right. 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 Yeah. Yeah. Try it out, and just see. And I know some people. So just, so let me know and I can maybe, send you somebody, some names or something.
Well, thank you so much. And thank you all for tuning in. Thank you all for listening. And I will talk to you all. Oh, if you have any questions for her, can you tell them your website again?
Yeah. It's www.youarebeautiful.com. So it's like the word you and the word beautiful put together. So you are beautiful, PLLC.com.
So if you want to contact her, please visit her website. I thank you again for tuning in, and I will talk to you all next week. Bye.